Clara Anderson, a 22-year-old from Stockholm, Sweden, stepped off the rickety bus onto a gravel road in rural England on a damp October evening in 2018. She'd signed up for an au pair position through an online agency, drawn by the promise of adventure and a decent stipend. Her destination was a looming Victorian estate owned by the Harrow family, Mr. and Mrs. Harrow, and their 2 children, 7-year-old Lily and 5-year-old Thomas. The house emerged from the fog like a spectre, its gabled roof piercing the grey sky, windows dark and uninviting. Clara dragged her suitcase up the cracked stone path, her breath visible in the chill air, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. The Harrows greeted her at the door, Mr. Harrow, a gaunt man with a forced smile, and Mrs. Harrow, a wiry woman whose eyes darted nervously. The children peeked from behind their mother, silent and pale, their gazes unnervingly steady. Inside, the house was a labyrinth of high ceilings, shadowy corridors, and creaking floorboards. The walls were adorned with oil portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their painted eyes seeming to track Clara's every move. A grand staircase spiraled upward, its banister worn smooth by countless hands, and the air carried a faint musty scent, like old books left to rot. The Harrows led her to her quarters in the attic, a steep climb up a narrow stairwell that groaned underfoot. The room was small, with slanted walls, a single bed draped in a faded quilt, and a lone window overlooking a foggy moor that stretched endlessly into the gloom. A rusty radiator hissed in the corner, barely warming the space. "You'll be fine here," Mrs. Harrow said, her voice clipped. "Your duties are simple. Mind the children after school, cook dinner, and stay out of the basement. It's just storage, nothing for you to bother with." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. That first night, Clara unpacked her meager belongings, a few sweaters, a journal, a photo of her parents, trying to settle in. The silence of the house was oppressive, broken only by the occasional howl of wind against the windowpane. She climbed into bed, the mattress sagging beneath her, and pulled the quilt tight. Just as sleep began to take her, a faint tapping startled her awake, like fingernails clicking against glass. It came from the window. Heart thudding, she slipped out of bed and crept over, her bare feet cold on the wooden floor. She peered through the grimy pane, expecting to see a branch or a bird, but there was only swirling mist, thick and impenetrable. The tapping stopped as she stared, leaving an eerie stillness. Shaking her head, she returned to bed, convincing herself it was the wind playing tricks. The next morning, the children left for school in a yellow van that rattled down the lane, leaving Clara alone in the cavernous house. She decided to explore, her curiosity outweighing the unease gnawing at her. The ground floor was a maze of parlors and sitting rooms, each filled with antique furniture draped in dust cloths. The portraits glared down at her, their expressions seeming to shift, disapproval, curiosity, malice, as she passed. In the kitchen, a cavernous space with a blackened hearth, she found a locked door beneath the main staircase, its frame weathered and splintered. The basement, she assumed. Pressing her ear to the wood, she heard a faint, rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat echoing from below. It stopped abruptly, as if aware of her presence. A chill ran down her spine, but she stepped back, brushing it off as old pipes settling. That afternoon, the children returned, their school bags dragging behind them. They were quieter than she'd expected, their faces drawn and tired. Lily, the older one, had sharp features and dark eyes that seemed too old for her age, while Thomas clung to a stuffed bear, his blonde curls matted with sweat. Clara tried to engage them, suggesting a game, but they only stared. As she cooked dinner, sausages and mash, per Mrs. Harrow's instructions, she felt a sudden cold breath on the back of her neck, sharp and deliberate. She spun around, expecting one of the children, but the kitchen was empty save for the sizzling pan. Her pulse quickened. Later, tucking the children into bed in their shared room down the hall, Lily grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Don't listen to the voices," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible. "They lie." Clara forced a laugh, assuming it was a child's fanciful tale, but Lily's unblinking stare lingered in her mind as she climbed the attic stairs. That night the tapping returned, louder, more insistent, a staccato rhythm that set her teeth on edge. She checked the window again, finding nothing but fog. Then, from the corner of her eye, a shadow flitted across the room, tall, thin, impossibly fast. She whirled around, her breath catching, but the attic was empty. Sleep eluded her as the house creaked and groaned, alive with secrets it refused to share. The days blurred into a haze of routine, but the house refused to let Clara settle. She woke each morning with a sense of dread, her dreams plagued by faceless figures and distant screams. The children grew stranger. Lily often sat motionless, staring at corners of the room, while Thomas muttered about the man in the walls, under his breath. Clara tried to chalk it up to imagination, but the house fed her unease. One morning, while tidying the kitchen, she found a porcelain doll on the counter, a doll she'd never seen before. Its head was twisted backward, its painted eyes wide and unseeing. She asked the children about it at breakfast, but they shook their heads, their faces blank. When she returned to the kitchen, the doll was gone, leaving only a faint ring of dust where it had sat. Her stomach churned. The oddities piled up. One night, a child's drawing slipped under her attic door, a crude sketch of a tall, eyeless figure with jagged limbs, labeled, him, in wobbly crayon. Clara's hands trembled as she folded it away, unsure whether to confront the children or the Harrows. The next day, while sweeping the hall, she found muddy footprints leading from the locked basement door to the foot of the attic stairs. They were small, child-sized, but the house had been empty all morning, the children at school, the Harrows at work. She followed the trail upward, her breath shallow, only to find it vanish halfway up the staircase, as if the walker had simply dissolved into the air. She scrubbed the mud away before anyone returned, her mind racing with questions she couldn't voice. The children's behavior worsened. During a game of hide-and-seek one dreary afternoon, Lily disappeared. Clara searched the house for hours, her calls echoing unanswered through the corridors. Panic clawed at her as she checked every room, every closet, her voice growing hoarse. Finally, she found the girl crouched in a wardrobe on the second floor, her knees drawn to her chest, trembling. "He told me to stay," Lily whispered, her eyes glassy. "Who?" Clara asked, her voice shaking. Lily pointed to the empty space beside her, her finger trembling. Clara pulled her out, slamming the wardrobe shut, her skin crawling. That night, she woke to footsteps climbing the attic stairs, slow, deliberate, heavy, each thud reverberating through the floorboards. She scrambled to lock the door, her fingers fumbling with the latch as the knob rattled violently. Then silence. At dawn, she opened the door to find a single muddy handprint smeared across the wall outside, its fingers elongated and claw-like. She stared at it, bow rising in her throat, until the sound of the children stirring downstairs forced her to wipe it away. Clara confronted the Harrows that evening, her voice tight with fear. She told them about the footsteps, the handprint, the doll, everything. Mr. Harrow scoffed, blaming old pipes and settling foundations, while Mrs. Harrow's eyes narrowed, her lips pressing into a thin line. "The children play tricks," she said curtly. "You're imagining the rest." But Clara knew better. The next night, while reading to the children in their room, a tattered copy of Peter Pan, the lights flickered, casting jagged shadows across the walls. The temperature plummeted, the air turning icy. Thomas screamed, pointing at the window. Clara turned, her heart lurching as she saw a pale, gaunt face pressed against the glass, hollow cheeks, black sockets where eyes should have been. It vanished the moment she blinked, leaving only condensation on the pane. She yanked the curtains shut, her hands shaking, and called the police. They arrived an hour later, their flashlights cutting through the dark, but found no footprints, no signs of intrusion. "That window's 20 feet up," one officer said, frowning. "No ladder, no ledge." "You sure of what you saw?" The Harrows dismissed it as hysteria, but Clara's certainty grew. Something was in the house, and it was watching her. Clara couldn't take it anymore. The house was suffocating her, its walls closing in with every creak, every shadow. She needed answers. Late one night, While the Harrows slept and the children lay still in their beds, she crept downstairs with a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer. The basement door loomed before her, its lock glinting in the dim light of her phone's flashlight. She wedged the screwdriver into the keyhole, her hands slick with sweat, and twisted until the mechanism gave way with a soft click. The door swung open, releasing a wave of damp, rancid air that smelled of earth and decay. Her stomach twisted, but she stepped onto the creaking stairs, descending into the dark. The basement was a cavern of shadows, her flashlight beams slicing through the gloom to reveal stacks of moldering furniture, chairs with broken legs, a cracked mirror reflecting her pale face, a rusted crib swaying slightly in the draft. Cobwebs draped the corners like veils, and the floor was slick with moisture. The thumping she'd heard days before echoed faintly, irregular now, like a faltering pulse. She moved deeper, her breath shallow, until she spotted a false wall, a wooden panel slightly ajar, revealing a hidden room. Pushing it open, she stepped inside, the air growing colder, heavier. Newspaper clippings were pinned to the walls, yellowed and curling, headlines about a groundskeeper who'd lived on the estate decades ago, a reclusive man named Edwin Cole. He'd gone mad, the article said, after the family's youngest child vanished in the 1950s. No body was found, and Cole disappeared soon after, presumed dead. Scratched into the stone beneath the clippings were the words, "I see you," the letters jagged and deep, as if carved in rage. A low growl rumbled behind her, primal and guttural. Clara spun around, dropping her flashlight, which rolled across the floor. Its beam landed on a pair of muddy boots standing upright in the shadows, empty, yet perfectly positioned, as if their owner had just stepped out of them. Her scream caught in her throat as she stumbled back, the growl growing louder, closer. She snatched the flashlight and ran, her footsteps pounding up the stairs. She slammed the basement door shut, shoving a chair against it, but the house erupted into chaos. Windows rattled, slamming shut one by one. The lights buzzed and flickered, casting the hall in strobe-like flashes, and the children's screams pierced the night, shrill and terrified. Clara bolted to their room, finding them huddled under the bed, sobbing. "The man! The man!" Thomas wailed, his bear clutched tight. Lily pointed at the doorway, her face ashen. The Harrows burst in, their pajamas disheveled, their eyes wild with anger. "What did you do?" Mrs. Harrow shrieked, grabbing Clara's arm. "Why were you down there?" Before Clara could answer, the basement door flew open with a deafening bang, the chair skittering across the floor. Footsteps echoed up the stairs, slow, deliberate, the same heavy tread she'd heard in the attic. The family froze as a silhouette appeared in the doorway, tall, impossibly thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its face, or where a face should have been, was a void, eyeless and black, yet it seemed to see them. Clara's legs buckled, but instinct took over. She grabbed the children, dragging them past the figure, its cold presence brushing her skin like frost. She ran down the stairs, out the front door, and into the foggy night, the children clinging to her as they stumbled across the moor. Clara never returned. She flagged down a passing car and got the children to safety, staying in a motel until her agency arranged her flight home. The Harrows claimed ignorance, insisting the house was fine, but Clara heard later they moved out within months. Locals whispered the estate had always been cursed, tied to Edwin Cole's madness, a presence that lingered, watching, waiting. Clara still sees those eyeless sockets in her nightmares, and she swears some nights she hears tapping at her window, no matter where she is. Mia Thompson, a 19-year-old from Sydney, Australia, arrived in the tiny French village of St. Lucer-Forêt in the autumn of 2016, her backpack heavy with optimism and a few well-worn travel guides. She'd signed up as an au pair through a European exchange program, eager to escape the monotony of her suburban life and immerse herself in a new culture. Her host was Madame Elise Lefebvre, a widow in her late 60s who lived alone in a stone cottage on the edge of a dense forest. The agency described the job as light housework and companionship. No children, just an elderly woman seeking help after losing her only son years earlier. Mia imagined cozy evenings by the fire, practicing her French, and exploring the countryside. But as the taxi dropped her off at the cottage's moss-covered gate on a rainy evening, a shiver ran through her that had little to do with the cold. The cottage was squat and ancient, its grey stone walls streaked with lichen, its steeply pitched roof sagging under the weight of time. The windows were small and cloudy, their panes warped, giving the impression the house was squinting at her. Madame Lefebvre opened the door as Mia approached, her silhouette framed by the dim glow of a single lamp. She was a small woman, her face deeply lined, her grey hair pulled into a tight bun. Her handshake was cold and brief, her eyes, an unsettling shade of pale blue, lingering on Mia a moment too long. "You're late," she said in heavily accented English, her voice raspy, like wind through dead leaves. Mia apologized, blaming the weather, but Madame only turned and beckoned her inside without another word. The interior was a claustrophobic jumble of faded furniture and clutter. The air smelled of mildew and lavender, a cloying mix that clung to Mia's throat. Every wall was covered with photographs, dozens, maybe hundreds, of a young boy with dark hair and a blank stare, his image repeated in black and white frames, some cracked, others speckled with age. Mia assumed this was the son, though Madame offered no introduction. A narrow hallway led to Mia's room, a cramped space with a creaky single bed, a chipped dresser, and a wardrobe with a rusty padlock securing its doors. "It's private," Madame said sharply when Mia's gaze lingered on it. "Don't touch it." Her tone brooked no questions, so Mia nodded, setting her backpack down on the faded rug. The window overlooked the forest, its twisted branches clawing at the sky, barely visible through the rain-streaked glass. That night Mia unpacked, the silence of the cottage pressing against her ears. The only sounds were the patter of rain and the occasional groan of the house settling. She climbed into bed, the springs squeaking beneath her, and pulled the thin blanket tight. Just as she began to drift off, a faint humming drifted through the walls, a soft, mournful lullaby, its melody unfamiliar yet haunting. She sat up, straining to listen. It seemed to come from Madame's room down the hall. Assuming it was the old woman, Mia lay back down, the sound lulling her into an uneasy sleep. But hours later, she jolted awake to a new noise, a soft tapping at her window, rhythmic and insistent, like someone testing the glass. Heart pounding, she slipped out of bed and peered outside. Rain blurred the view, and the forest beyond was a wall of shadow. The tapping continued, sharp and deliberate, but she saw nothing, no branch, no bird, no explanation. She locked the window, her fingers trembling, and climbed back into bed, pulling the blanket over her head. As she did, she noticed the wardrobe door was slightly ajar, a thin crack of darkness where it hadn't been before. She hadn't touched it. Sleep came fitfully, the humming and tapping weaving through her dreams. The next morning, Madame was silent, her presence heavy as she watched Mia scrub the kitchen floor. The old woman sat in a rocking chair, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes unblinking. Mia tried to break the ice, asking about the village, the forest, anything, but Madame only nodded or muttered rapid French that Mia couldn't follow. While dusting the living room later, Mia found a child's shoe under the couch, small, muddy, its laces frayed. It was far too tiny for an adult, and Madame lived alone. Curious, she held it up and asked, "Whose is this?" Madame's face darkened, her lips thinning into a slash. She snatched the shoe from Mia's hand, her grip like iron, and hissed, "Mind your own business." She stormed off, clutching the shoe to her chest, leaving Mia frozen in the dim room. That night, the humming returned, louder, joined by the tapping at the window, faster now, almost frantic. Mia checked again, seeing only rain and trees, but the sound gnawed at her nerves. When she turned back, the wardrobe door was open wider, a sliver of black yawning within. She slammed it shut, her breath ragged, and wedged a chair against it, telling herself it was just the wind. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. The days in St. Lucer foray stretched into a surreal blur, each one heavier with unease. Mia's tasks were simple, cleaning, cooking, fetching groceries from the village, but the cottage felt like a trap, its walls closing in with every creak and sigh. Madame Lefebvre rarely spoke, her silence a palpable weight, her eyes following Mia like a predator tracking prey. The photographs of the boy stared from every corner, his expression unchanging, his presence inescapable. Mia began to notice more oddities: a button from a child's coat on the stairs, a sock tucked behind a cushion, a broken toy car under the sink. Each time she found something, she'd blink, and it would vanish when she looked again, as if the house itself was playing tricks. She asked Madame about them once, holding up a tiny mitten she'd found in the pantry, but the old woman's glare silenced her, her hand snatching it away with a snarl. "Stop meddling!" she snapped, and retreated to her room, slamming the door. The nights were worse. The humming grew more frequent, drifting through the walls at odd hours, sometimes joined by faint whispers Mia couldn't decipher. The tapping at her window became a nightly ritual, sharp and relentless, keeping her awake until exhaustion claimed her. She stopped checking outside. There was never anything to see, but the sound burrowed into her mind. The wardrobe door continued its games, creaking open when her back was turned, no matter how tightly she secured it. One morning, she found a small handprint smudged on the inside of the glass, its fingers splayed as if pressed from within. She scrubbed it away, her heart racing, but didn't tell Madame. The old woman's temper was a live wire, and Mia feared sparking it. The forest added to her dread. On her walks to the village, a mile through winding paths, she felt watched, the trees looming like silent sentinels. Once she heard footsteps crunching behind her, quick and light, but when she turned, the path was empty, the leaves still. Another time, a child's laugh echoed through the branches, sharp and fleeting, though no one was there. She quickened her pace, the cottage's squat shape a reluctant refuge. Back inside, the strange items persisted. One afternoon, while sweeping, she found a lock of dark hair tied with a ribbon beneath the rug, hair that matched the boy in the photographs. She slipped it into her pocket, intending to ask later, but it was gone by evening, leaving only the ribbon behind. Her nerves frayed with each discovery, her sleep plagued by dreams of a small figure standing at the foot of her bed, silent and staring. Then came the breaking point. One rainy evening, Mia was alone in the kitchen, chopping carrots for soup, when the lights flickered. The humming started, loud, insistent, coming from everywhere at once. She dropped the knife, her hands trembling, as the temperature plunged, her breath clouding in the air. A shadow darted across the room, small, child-sized, too fast to follow. She spun around, calling out, but the kitchen was empty. The humming stopped, replaced by a soft giggle from the hallway. Heart pounding, she crept toward the sound, her flashlight trembling in her grip. The hallway was dark, the photographs glinting in the beam, the boy's eyes seeming to follow her. At the end of the hall, Madame's door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling out. Mia peeked inside, expecting to see the old woman, but the room was empty, bed made, chair vacant. The giggle came again, from behind her. She whirled around, the beam catching a glimpse of a small figure vanishing around the corner. She ran after it, her pulse thundering, but found only the locked wardrobe in her room, its door rattling as if something inside was trying to get out. Mia barricaded herself in her room that night, shoving the dresser against the wardrobe. The tapping at the window escalated into banging, the glass shuddering with each blow. She called Madame's name, but no answer came. At dawn, she found the old woman in the kitchen, sipping tea as if nothing had happened. "You look tired," Madame said, her smile thin and cold. Mia demanded to know what was going on, the noises, the shadow, the objects. Madame's eyes narrowed. "You're imagining things," she said. "This house is old. It creaks." But Mia saw the flicker of something, fear, guilt, in the old woman's gaze. She didn't believe her. That day, she resolved to uncover the truth, no matter what it cost. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that the cottage was hiding something Madame Lefebvre refused to acknowledge. The shadow, the giggles, the child's belongings, they pointed to a secret buried deep within the stone walls. She waited until the old woman left for the village one foggy morning, her coat flapping as she shuffled down the path. Alone at last, Mia grabbed a butter knife from the kitchen and approached the wardrobe in her room. The padlock gleamed dully, its metal cold to the touch. She wedged the knife into the lock, twisting and prying, her hands slick with sweat. After several agonizing minutes, the lock snapped open with a loud crack, echoing through the silent house. She hesitated, her breath shallow, then pulled the doors apart. Inside was a shrine. Shelves lined the wardrobe, cluttered with relics of a child's life, a teddy bear with one eye missing, a stack of yellowed drawings, a pair of tiny boots crusted with dirt. Photographs of the boy, more than those on the walls, were pinned to the back, some showing him laughing, others with his face scratched out. A wooden box sat on the top shelf, its lid carved with the name Etienne. Mia's hand shook as she opened it, revealing a bundle of letters tied with string, a lock of dark hair, identical to the one she'd found, and a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local boy missing, mother suspected." Dated 1995. The article described how Etienne Lefebvre, age 6, vanished from the cottage one winter night. Madame, his mother, claimed he'd wandered into the forest, but villagers whispered of arguments, of strange behavior, of a locked room no one could enter. No body was found, and the case went cold. A floorboard creaked behind her. Mia spun around, the box slipping from her hands, letters spilling across the floor. Madame stood in the doorway, her face a mask of fury, her eyes blazing. "What are you doing?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. Mia stammered, pointing to the shrine. "Who was he? What happened to him?" Madame lunged forward, slamming the wardrobe shut with a force that rattled the walls. "Get out!" she screamed, her hands clawing at Mia's arms. But before Mia could move, the lights flickered, and the humming filled the room, louder, angrier, a chorus of whispers weaving through it. The temperature dropped, the air crackling with static. Madame froze, her eyes darting to the wardrobe as it began to shake, the doors banging open and shut. A shadow erupted from within, a small, twisted figure, its limbs too long, its face obscured by a tangle of dark hair. It darted past them, vanishing into the hall with a guttural wail. Mia screamed, stumbling back, as Madame sank to her knees, sobbing. "Etienne, forgive me!" The house came alive, windows slamming, furniture scraping across the floor, the photographs crashing down one by one. Mia ran, grabbing her backpack, her mind reeling. She burst into the fog, the cottage's screams fading behind her, and didn't stop until she reached the village. She called the agency, begging to leave, and spent the night in a hostel, her hands trembling as she recounted the story to a skeptical clerk. The police investigated later, finding the wardrobe empty save for dust and cobwebs. Madame claimed Mia was delusional, that she'd broken into a private space and imagined the rest. But the villagers weren't surprised. Rumors of Etienne's ghost had circled for years, tied to a mother's guilt and a night no one could explain. Mia flew home the next day, her dreams haunted by that shadow, that wail. She never learned the full truth, but she swears the humming follows her still, faint and mournful, a reminder of the secret she unlocked.